They called it a ghost on the roof of Europe, an installation so deeply buried into the granite spine of the mountains that for years it existed only as a rumor whispered through intercepted dispatches. During World War II, when reconnaissance film was treated like sacred evidence, and every blurred shadow might mark a hidden battery, this fortress broke every rule. It did not hide. It simply disappeared. Repeated Allied flights returned with the same baffling result. An entire fortified complex erased from every aerial frame as if the mountain itself rejected being photographed. And that impossibility became the burning question inside several intelligence commands. How a massive strategic fortress could vanish from photos in a war defined by the eye and the sky. The mountains looked ordinary enough from the first passes. Endless ridges of stone, sharp valleys, snow-lined crests illuminated in harsh light from high-altitude bombers. The crews navigating these ranges knew the danger. Unpredictable winds, thin air, and jagged terrain waiting for a single mistake. Yet even under perfect visibility, the target zone produced nothing unusual. Recon aircraft swept across the region again and again, documenting ridgelines, rock patterns, and shadows. Each roll of film came back consistent, repeatable. No fortress, no gun positions, no signs of habitation. But human sources insisted something enormous was hidden inside those peaks. And human sources were rarely that unanimous without reason. By early 1942, analysts gathered around light tables, sliding negatives back and forth, hoping to find a flaw in their own assumptions. Experienced photo interpreters who had trained their eyes to identify camouflaged artillery by the angle of shadows or the color of disturbed soil were now looking for something far stranger, evidence of deliberate cinematic deception. Yet the frame showed only clean, unbroken geology. Even blurred images revealed nothing altered or out of place. The mountain swallowed every detail. That led to the first uncomfortable theory. The fortress was not built on the mountain, but inside it. Reports began suggesting vast internal chambers, reinforced caverns cut directly into the rock. If true, the engineers responsible had achieved a wartime miracle, constructing bunkers, barracks, and artillery nests without leaving an external signature detectable from above. And so the search widened to include any subtle modification, a disguised ventilation grid, a concealed access road, the faint pattern of camouflaged roofing. Even the smallest unnatural straight line could betray a hidden structure. But the film still refused to cooperate. The solution, some argued, was camouflage taken to an extreme. By World War II standards, the Axis powers already mastered visual deception. Mock airfields, inflatable tanks, wooden artillery, and nets woven to mimic vegetation. But nothing else in the war matched what seemed to be happening in the mountains. If the intelligence was accurate, someone had created a visual dead zone, a sector where reconnaissance technology simply failed. Anti-aircraft batteries were rumored to line the cliffs, yet no shadows of barrels or emplacements ever appeared on film. Patrol routes existed, yet not a single trail was caught by lens or sunlight. The idea that nets and paints could produce such an effect was absurd. This went beyond camouflage. It bordered on optical engineering. Allied planners cross-checked older photographic archives, searching for discrepancies between seasons. If a fortress existed, winter snow should have revealed uneven heat signatures or disrupted patterns. Yet the comparison charts showed near-perfect continuity between years, as though the terrain had been carefully restored after every modification. Cartographers were forced to confront an unsettling possibility. The mountain's map was lying, or rather, someone had made sure that the cartographers only thought they were seeing the truth. So aerial missions escalated. High-altitude crews prepared for runs that pushed the limits of their aircraft. Thin, freezing air, engines straining against altitude ceilings. Every sortie brought back clearer film, sharper contrast, improved angles. Still nothing. It was as if the mountain had become a blind spot in the war, protected by silence rather than steel. Deep inside the intelligence archives, however, fragments of intercepted radio traffic hinted at ongoing construction. The fortress was real. It was growing. And that meant the engineers behind it were performing their work with near-ritual discipline. Workers hauled materials by night, advancing tunnels, reinforcing chambers, expanding internal transport shafts carved through stone. Every movement synchronized to avoid producing visible scars on the exterior rock. No piles of waste rubble, no reflective metal, no construction vehicles visible from above, everything hidden under camo nets, inserted through narrow mountain passes or lowered in pieces to disappear beneath natural overhangs. Then came the detail that truly alarmed the analysts. Hidden artillery platforms embedded inside the mountain, their barrels capable of sliding out from behind slabs of natural stone. When inactive, the guns retracted back into darkness, leaving no trace on the surface. It explained why no batteries were ever seen on reconnaissance film. The enemy had built their firepower into a geological shell. By mid-war, the pressure on Allied intelligence intensified. Why had so much effort gone into hiding this one fortress? What strategic purpose justified such extreme secrecy? A meeting among high-ranking officers assembled scattered evidence into a chilling hypothesis. The mountain's location allowed control over several critical passes. Inside its stone heart might lie supply depots, encrypted communication hubs, or a fallback command center designed to survive even heavy bombing campaigns. If the war turned, this place could become a last-stand redoubt, fortified, concealed, and nearly impossible to destroy. But even that explanation failed to account for the most troubling fact. The fortress was still missing from every aerial photograph. The terrain looked undisturbed, natural, untouched by human hands. Analysts were forced to consider the unthinkable. Perhaps the enemy had learned not just to hide structures, but to erase them from the sky entirely. Fog and mountain mist played their part, rolling across the installation like a living curtain, masking entrances, softening shadows, reducing contrast. Even on clear days, cold air rising from deep tunnels distorted light just enough to warp details, creating unpredictable visual noise on film. A kind of atmospheric camouflage, primitive but shockingly effective. The breakthrough came late, long after countless flights had failed to reveal anything meaningful. A reconnaissance team using experimental lenses and flying at a rare angle of dusk detected faint anomalies in the rock. Lines where no natural erosion should occur. Shadows that behaved in ways inconsistent with geology. And then, finally, on a film strip nearly discarded, something unmistakable. Angular geometry half-masked beneath the stone. The fortress existed. And for the first time, it was no longer invisible. Once the first fragment of evidence emerged, Allied intelligence moved with renewed precision. Engineers, photo interpreters, and reconnaissance officers worked together to re-examine every previous frame. What had once been dismissed as natural shadowing now gained new meaning. Under magnification, subtle distortions revealed repeated patterns. A curvature too smooth for nature, a line too consistent to be geological. The mountain had been altered, but the alterations were blended with obsessive craftsmanship. Only by stacking frames chronologically did the deception unravel. The terrain changed in microscopic increments over months, disguised by incremental camouflage layers adjusted after every snowfall, every storm, every season. This discovery triggered a series of intense operations meant to decode the fortress's true layout. Analysts attempted to reconstruct the installation's interior purely from the disturbances in the external environment. The air above certain ridges shimmered just slightly more than physics allowed, hinting at ventilation shafts buried deep within the rock. Snow melted faster along select contours, exposing heat traces from internal generators. Fresh vegetation in narrow areas implied concealed water sources fed from storage tanks. Piece by piece, the invisible fortress began to outline itself, not as a traditional installation perched atop a mountain, but as a subterranean stronghold carved into its core. The more analysts learned, the more unsettling the project became. Internal reports suggested multiple levels descending into the rock, interconnected by reinforced shafts capable of withstanding heavy bombardment. Artillery chambers pivoted within rotating mounts embedded in stone. Ammunition stores were shielded by both natural geology and artificially constructed shock-absorbing barriers. Even communication lines snaked through the mountain, insulated and masked against ground-penetrating detection. This was more than a hiding place. It was a fortress designed for endurance. Once the installation's outline was finally confirmed, the next step was confronting its purpose. Intelligence officers pored over declassified communications hinting at large-scale logistical tunnels, routes linking the fortress to distant valleys through kilometers of rock. These shafts could transport fuel, ammunition, or personnel unseen. The installation may have acted as a relay hub, a concealed nexus for command operations isolated from Allied bombing campaigns. If the war escalated, this hidden mountain could support coordinated troop movements and serve as an armored nerve center unreachable by conventional methods. By the final years of World War II, Allied command faced the strategic dilemma: how to neutralize a fortress that refused to be photographed. Conventional aerial bombardment lacked precision without reliable visual confirmation. Artillery had no line of sight. Ground assault required navigating treacherous, narrow passes under conditions the defenders knew intimately. The installation's invisibility made it more than hard to target. It made it nearly impossible even to conceptualize on tactical maps. A fortress that did not exist on film was, in effect, one that intelligence struggled to define. Eventually, small reconnaissance teams advanced along dangerous mountain paths, moving in total silence and at night, seeing for the first time what cameras could not capture. Hidden metal slits carved into rock faces glinted briefly under moonlight. Access points concealed behind what looked like natural stone opened silently inward. Camouflage nets blended so perfectly with the environment that one could stand within arm's reach and still not detect the structures beneath. The fortress had been engineered to defeat technology at every level, from photography to acoustics to thermal observation. Not by advanced machines, but through the relentless discipline of engineering teams who shaped the mountain as a living mask. At last, as Axis resistance dwindled and supply lines collapsed, the fortress was abandoned by its garrison. Patrols sent after the war found the installation intact. Silent tunnels, untouched artillery chambers, fuel reserves preserved in the cold darkness. The fortress had not been destroyed nor even damaged. It had simply been left behind as if its purpose evaporated with the war. Once the heavy blast doors were forced open, investigators walked into rooms that still smelled faintly of oil and dust. Maps pinned to walls, boots left under bunks, half-burned candles marking the last watch shifts. A place built with obsession, surrendered without a fight. Only then did the outside world finally see what had been hidden. Declassified aerial camo files revealed the techniques used to distort reconnaissance photos. Layered netting that matched the rock's fractal patterns. False snow made from treated fibers that obscured heat traces. Vent shafts angled to disperse warm air sideways rather than upward. movable stone facades constructed from reinforced resin blends indistinguishable from granite at altitude. Primitive by modern standards, but devastatingly effective in an era dominated by optical intelligence. The fortress had survived not through strength alone, but because it weaponized invisibility itself. Historians now consider it one of the most extraordinary feats of deception in the entire Second World War. It demonstrated how human ingenuity could challenge the dominance of aerial surveillance, how a determined force could erase its presence even under the relentless watch of the sky. Long after the war, intelligence agencies studied the camouflaging principles used here, refining them into peacetime research on stealth, concealment, and optical distortion. The mountain fortress, once a ghost, later a revelation, helped shape the future of how armies think about hiding what must remain unseen. And so the story of the fortress that vanished from World War II aerial photographs becomes more than a tale of engineering brilliance. It stands as a reminder that the war was not fought only with tanks and planes, but with ideas. Ideas powerful enough to bend the perception of those watching from above. In the cold clarity of the post-war years, commanders acknowledged an enduring lesson, that even in a conflict defined by sweeping offensives and industrial might, the greatest advantage often came from the ability to remain unseen. In the end, the mountain returned to silence, its tunnels echoing only with the distant memory of a war that once shook the world. The fortress carved into its depths remains a testament to the lengths nations will go to shape the battlefield, not just through force, but through the shadows. And as we look back at WWII and its vast tapestry of strategy, sacrifice, and innovation, the vanished mountain fortress stands as one of its most haunting legacies, proof that in the largest war humanity ever faced, even the sky could be deceived.